Welcome back to another episode of Breaking Boundaries, the world's premier podcast for international students, or at least in the top 1,000. I'm John with the TOEFL program, broadcasting live for the first time without headphones, which is an unnerving experience. And I'm joined today by a distinguished guest, Jamie Conkey, the Senior Director of Partner Success at Match, powered by Concourse. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I too am without headphones, so we are commiserating together.
It's liberating. I love it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you first. So I brought you on because you might be the world's premier expert on something called direct admissions, which is a unique concept, especially for international students. And the customary model is a student applies to University X and waits anxiously to hear back from University X, sometimes months later. But what you offer is something called direct admissions. So just to ground us and provide a little foundation for the conversation, what is direct admissions?
Yeah, you nailed it. Actually, students these days actually are applying to tons of universities. It's more like applying to university A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Plenty, and then waiting anxiously for all of the responses. But direct admissions, in the simplest of terms, is when universities proactively offer admission to students based on some set of criteria without requiring a traditional application up front. That sentence, if you have a transcript and you're looking at it, is incredibly vague, super ambiguous. And if I like to break it into parts and sort of define it for people. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I would love to talk. So when a university offers admission, what kind of admission? I think the listeners of your podcast will be very familiar with the ideas of conditional admission and what does that entail and what kinds of conditions and what am I being admitted to? Am I being admitted to the school, to a specific program? There's so much ambiguity in just when a university offers admission. The second part of that sentence was based on some set of criteria, also super vague. What on earth kind of criteria? Am I providing the criteria as a student? Am I offering up that information, or are you getting it some way that I'm not unaware of? Are my parents giving you this information? Is my school teacher, my counselor giving you this information? Where are you getting this criteria that you're deciding you want to make an admission offer to me? The other pieces are without requiring a traditional application up front. So I'm not requiring a traditional application, but maybe I'm requiring a non-traditional application. What does that mean? Is that a short form? Is that an interview? Is it a dramatic poem reading? I don't know. It's super vague, right?
Right.
And then the last word is upfront, requiring that application upfront. Does that mean I need to submit the application after you've admitted me or when? So all of that to say, the sentence, the definition is super vague. But the mentality and the idea of direct admissions, the whole ethos of it was originally to make it easier for students, to remove barriers, to make it more straightforward, and to help students move through this kind of stressful process more quickly. In so doing, we have made it potentially a little more confusing with our language. However, just keep in mind the general idea and the principle behind it was to make it easier for students.
That makes perfect sense. And, I went to college. I have a 3-year-old and 5-year-old, and I'm a dozen years away from this, but I already dread the admissions process for many of the reasons you raised. In addition to conditional, you can get admitted early, but then you have to make some additional decisions. That suggests you could also get admitted late. How late? Do I show up late on campus? Do I have to catch up? So much confusion. Now, the direct admissions itself, my understanding is, in very simple terms, student creates a profile, universities go and find them. Is it that simple for a student using Match? Walk us through the process if a student is using the platform itself.
So our platform, the one that we've created, interestingly, when we started this platform, it was 2017, 2018. It was a while ago. And we built it with international students in mind. So you actually, we're hearing a lot about direct admissions now, particularly in the US for US students. We're not hearing so much about it internationally, but Match, powered by Concourse, has been around for years and has been doing this internationally. And so the way that we do things is that we work directly with high schools and with college guidance counselors, that independent counselors and things like that. So basically, the student will create exactly what you said, a profile, sort of saying, here's who I am, here's what I'm looking for. It's a different mindset, right? This isn't a college search tool where I'm going to go look up all the universities and that kind of thing. This is more of an internal exercise. Who am I? And who am I looking to become? And what do I want? Putting that on paper, so to speak, and then allowing institutions to come in and sort of hand select the students that they think are going to be the best fit for their institution based on what the student's looking for and what they have to offer. And we do that in a protected way. That sounds like I'm opening you up for a lot of spam, but we do anonymize all of our student profiles. So the universities are making offers, but they have no idea who you are. They can see all the information, but not your name, no personal information, no emails. You're not going to be getting phone calls or spammy emails or anything like that. You're just going to be getting admission offers.
Oh, this is great. And the anonymity also helps remove some potential sources of bias from the process as well, which I imagine is a source of some appeal.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, that's very cool. Now, you mentioned the intervention of counselors, both independent and at secondary schools. It sounds like for the platform to really maximize its potential, students need to first liaise or go through a counselor in most cases.
It is best to go through a counselor. It's good to have someone sort of just being with you through that process. I think what you have to understand about institutions who are admitting students from abroad, and this goes for Canadian institutions or for Australian, it doesn't matter. If they're admitting students from abroad, there is a certain level of risk that institutions are incurring when they admit students from abroad. And that's because there's immigration things involved and things that have legal impact on various institutions. And so they are assuming some level of risk. So to have a counselor or a teacher or just someone else there to sort of vouch for you and say, yep, this is a legitimate student, they are definitely looking to go abroad, that makes the whole process so much easier. Because again, remember, the institutions are making offers and they have no idea who you are. So we're sort of giving them a layer of comfort, if you will, as they're making blind offers of admission to students.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It would be, this is a cheesy example, but creating a dating profile on an app and having a mutual friend vouch for that particular person before you go have a sandwich.
Right. Exactly. It's the same, and the same with LinkedIn and letting people, I know maybe high school students in particular aren't quite using LinkedIn yet, but, letting people sort of tag you or I forget the word that they use, but they basically can refer you, right? On LinkedIn, they can write up a nice little reference about how they know you or how they've worked with you, just validating who you are.
Right. And I you can tell how long it has been since I've been in the dating scene because my idea of a date was a sandwich. So you're welcome to international students for that romantic idea.
Please don't invite anyone out for a sandwich on your first date.
So this sounds so fun and so simple. Why isn't everyone doing direct admissions? What are some of the barriers for students and institutions alike?
I think the big one is, especially for international, is that risk piece. I think that let me back up. In the U.S., domestically, because there's really very little risk. So let's say you're a bad actor and you're a 52-year-old man who's just trying to see if you can get free admission to universities. You could go on to any number of sites and plug in some fake information. And if the university admits you, great. But when you are asked to verify those things, you're going to get caught and they're not actually going to let you enroll. If you're doing that as an international and there's immigration involved, now we've got a legal problem. Now we've got immigration involved. Now you've got, you're trying to get visas. This becomes a much bigger thing. So for institutions to assume that kind of risk, making blind offers, they're going to need some additional layers of added security, basically. They'll do it, but that goes back to the question about having counselors involved and that type of thing. We also know that, not every school has guidance counselors that are there to focus on getting students into college. That's a pretty Western mentality, I think, is to have a guidance counselor or a college counselor helping you. So having a teacher or somebody like that, just again, like I said, to vouch for you makes it much easier. And it has been a shift. It's been a mentality shift, not only for students to suddenly be pursued as opposed to always having to kind of chase the universities. It's also a mental shift for institutions, and they are admittedly pretty old school. So getting universities to think about admissions in a very different way, it's slow. Change is slow.
And there is, I think, logic to this in the future. I called last year the great realignment in international education, and that's a euphemism for a really steep decline in some of the traditional destination countries. In the US, you had a 12% decline in study visas issued. In Canada, there was a 60% drop in applications from India, just to use a few examples. And as the pool of available candidates narrows, it strikes me as reasonable to expect universities to take a little more time to proactively recruit candidates themselves based on their profiles, especially as competition rises from countries like Germany, France, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and the like. Well, you've given a great description of what direct admissions is. Stepping back and taking kind of a 10,000 meter view at the international student landscape, change is afoot in many countries. But broadly speaking, given all of your experience in the field, do you have any tips for international students that are looking to find a home in a different country to study?
I have to say, any student who is thinking about even if you haven't, figured it out entirely, you haven't figured out exactly where you want to go. If you're even thinking about it, there's already something special about you. You are clearly someone who is searching for more, who is thirsty for knowledge, and who is brave. Can we just, for a moment, acknowledge how brave you are for even just thinking of yourself to plant yourself in a completely new environment? It also tells me that you, like I said, kind of a constant state of wanting more knowledge. And I think, so you're already a special individual, a special human being. If you're thinking about that, if you're even listening to this, I imagine you are a certain type of individual. What I think we can learn from today's turbulent world, where everything seems to be changing lightning fast in all of especially the popular destinations, but as you mentioned, new destinations popping up everywhere. The skill or the trait that I think is most important for a student right now is adaptability. And I think not only once you've been admitted and you go and you plant yourself in that new country surrounded by people from all over and, being able to adapt to your new location, but I think even in your search process right now, so if you're, thinking about where you're going to send off applications or how you're even going to go about being adaptable at this point is really important. You might have your heart set on a particular country, and tomorrow, who knows what's going to happen. And so I think being adaptable and understanding it's not the end of the world if I can't go to this country right now. Where else could I go? You're already halfway there. If you're thinking about uprooting and moving to a new location, you're already adaptable. So just keeping an open mind as you're going through your search process, I think is super important.
That's a great point. That's also the first time this word bravery has popped up on the podcast. But in my experience with international students, even in the best of circumstances, you are absolutely right. It takes an extraordinary amount of courage to uproot one's life, travel abroad, to study, especially if it's not in your native language. It's a great point. There's real courage. It's also no surprise that a disproportionate number of successful entrepreneurs in both the U.S. and Canada, and I imagine elsewhere, are from overseas. It's that adaptability, that courage, thirst for knowledge, willingness to take risks. So that's a great point. Jamie, one last question for you. You have lived this life. You have lived and worked in countries like Japan and Malaysia. I'm curious about how your experiences abroad inform how you work with both universities and students in the international landscape?
Man. So I am half Japanese, and I grew up in Middle America, and there were not a lot of people who looked like me or had obviously even a similar background to me. And I in my mind, I had thought, oh, when I go to Japan, like maybe it'll feel more, I'll find more people like me or think, and I got there, there was nobody like me. I had That's not true. Of course there were, but not where I was living. And the idea of like a mixed race person was very novel and obviously foreign to a lot of the people that I lived around and was introduced to. And so I kind of went to this place that was supposed to feel a little bit more familiar. And I got there and kind of had this sort of eye-opening moment. And I do remember when I left, my father said, he wrote me a card. We're not big on like feelings or sharing things, but he wrote me a card. And the very last thing that he signed off was go humbly. And I didn't think much of it other than like, that's a weird thing to sign a card off. Like, love dad, maybe, I don't know. But like when I got there and realized that it was not at all what I was so sure I was going to experience, it was a humbling moment, and it was really eye-opening. So I think no matter how much research you do about a particular place or what assumptions you think or what parts of it you think are aligned with your own internal culture, you got to go eyes wide open and just be ready to be wrong about a lot of things. It's a humbling experience going abroad. I think that it makes you a better person because you are humbled, but you got to be open to it.
It's such a wonderful cap to the conversation. This has also been my experience going abroad, trying to navigate another country with another language. It is deeply humbling. And you realize there are so many ways to live a fulfilling life. Yep. And one of the benefits of study abroad, both for the student and the other students in the classroom, is that you gain exposure to these other ways of living. And Japan is a great example. Japan wants to host 400,000 international students over the next few years, which would place it on par with Germany and France. And with the rise of inter-Asia travel, I wouldn't bet against them. So those who are going to Japan's shores, just remember to arrive with a certain sense of humility as well as your innate courage, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, Jamie Conkey, it's been a wonderful conversation. If students are more interested in your work, you can look up Match by Concourse, mention it to your guidance counselor. It's a great resource, and I do think direct admissions are likely the wave of the future. Otherwise, Jamie, we're very grateful for your time, and we're glad that you came back over to the States from Japan.
Thank you so much. It's been great to chat with you today.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.